Check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. This is Fen, live from the satellite with another best of the year. This time it's microscopic scale. It does still comprise the year's full list, though. Anyway, without further ado, this year we're going to open with music. If you've watched any of these videos before, you know how the structure works. I just talk about each entry and I don't edit it really at all. Anyway, the first album this year is Ollie XL's Rogue Intruder Soul Enhancer, which, to be perfectly honest, I barely listened to this year. This one's just been a favorite for several years. It is it's some real masterpiece stuff. It's extremely, extremely good, but my very little listening to it this year is because it's become such a big influence on what I want to do, that I want to keep the form that it's turned into my brain intact rather than how it actually exists. It has like taken on this sort of sublime nature in my brain, and I want to keep that alive rather than listen to the actual thing. I'm very excited for the next Ollie XL album, though. Lick the Lens will probably be unbelievably good. Also, hiya Sneak, I'm sure you're listening to this. Anyway, Rogue Intruder Soul Enhancer is one of the very few artworks in the world that's kind of hit me like a bolt and immediately changed what I want to make forever. Beautiful high atmospherics and sort of radio tone floating in and out. It's incredible. You should really listen to it. Next is Janelle Monáe's The Electric Lady, which is some seriously sprawling resistance music, queer liberation music, as well as liberation music for people of color. It incorporates a huge amount of history, but is also just extremely immediate pop music. It's got that nearly perfect pop music feel where it's sort of halfway between a pastiche and existing totally as its own. It's a really hard space to define, but it seems to be a place that a lot of extremely great artists end up. It's all over the Beatles, though arguably that's because they defined the niche that they then sound like a pastiche of. It is also all over the Beach Boys. A lot of Harumi Hosono's work has it. I have it on good authority that quite a bit of Kylie Minogue's work has that feel. It's a sign of true mastery, and to have that in a basically second album is completely ridiculous. The Electric Lady is just great. You should listen to it. I listened to it once at 3 a.m. as I had to commute to some place, and I was on like a cold train station. And it's good for that, a cold, empty train station early in the morning where you're feeling quite good. Next album is Tori Amos's From the Choirgirl Hotel, which is super amazing. It's been something I haven't been able to listen to for a while because it pulls me into a very particular place and once it's not extremely happy. But it's an incredible piece of work. It's got this feeling like the instrumental elements are a film stretched over a very dark, deep, black pit. And you constantly feel that in the cracks between the sounds working its way up and kind of pushing its way through gaps or soaking the whole mix. The songs have these long passages of resistance and sort of stalwart, or never quite resignation, which explode into massive sections of passion, slamming pianos or guitar riffs. Hotel is particularly great. I love its structure. I love the way it ends in the sort of MIDI organ thing. Somebody else that recognizes that MIDI is like sublime and amazing. MIDI is great when applied well. It's stunning. From the Choirgirl Hotel is great. You should listen to it. You should listen to all of these. Next, Curve's Open Day at the Hate Fest, which is Curve is some very angry 90s kind of girl industrial. This album is angry and sharp, and it's been a very necessary tool many parts of this year because it has a perfect effect of transmitting sorrow into willpower. It does that, of course, through anger, and anger is really only the first step to having a more sustainable willpower, but when there's a lot of sorrow, having the ability to do something is good. I really, really respect art that becomes an experiential tool, something that you just have on you as if in a holster, and you pull out and you can apply it to yourself and change perception. That's amazing. It's one of the best things about albums and how portable they are, how you carry them with you, how you can store them. The fact that we can have multiple albums, like hundreds of albums on a phone now, is a miracle. We live in the future. Anyway, if you've noticed a trend so far, it might be that feminine resistance music seems to be this year's score. Monet is non-binary, but there's an element there of it. Resistance music in general, but especially feminine resistance music. If you'll forgive me doing the admittedly dicey thing of trying to use heroine and hero as non-gendered terms to mean separate things, and you see the hero's journey as a material external quest, and the heroine's journey as an internal quest, usually just to sort of continue existence, to sort of prove that they still exist in a world that's suppressing them, which again, it's dicey perhaps to use these terms and associate these strictly with like gender roles, but I'm talking the generalized scope of art as it exists already, and also trying to use them in a non-gendered way. This year has been very heroine's journey centric for me, and the feminine resistance music seems to really, it pushes that. It gives strength to it. Other people feel this. Other people are striving on this internal path to just exist, basically. From that, you might get the sense that it hasn't been an entirely great year, and you would not be incorrect. But I've also made, over last year and the first half of this year so far, 11 video games. So, pros and cons, silver linings. Next album is Cindy Lee's What's Tonight to Eternity, which is a recommendation by esteemed buddy Squam of the Art Corner. Wow, What's Tonight to Eternity is really, really good. Amazing texture and force in terms of its arrangement. It's got that perfect lo-fi feeling where it's like hearing an inhumanly incredible mix from a room over. By obscuring the whole thing, you kind of get that. It's like you're listening to, it gives your brain interpretive room to find the best possible version of it, or like believe in the best possible version of it. And through that, the songwriting highs feel like higher than even like a perfectly mixed version of it could. What's Tonight to Eternity has that all over, especially Lucifer Stand. The whole texture of it is like an ash cloud. Sometimes it's electrified, and sometimes it's seething, and sometimes it's just hanging. But walking fast and angry to Lucifer Stand is amazing. It feels like that big black cloud is tailing you from behind. Wonderful, wonderful album. Finally, in what might feel like a diversion if you haven't been paying too attention to very particular substrates of the opinions I've been saying very fast, for which I could not blame you. Next up is 4 New Hit Songs by DOS. It's just unbelievably tight, nearly perfect club music. Every part of it sticks in your brain. Nothing takes the attention away from the core rhythm, that forward movement. I can come back to it like an endless amount of times. Nothing is too hooky or doesn't have enough hook. It's just completely rock solid. It's only 4 songs, but yeah, they're 4 new hit songs. They're 4 basically perfect songs. The textures are great. I love the way vocals are used. The ambience on the start of Strawberry is maybe some of the warmest ambient sound that I have ever heard in my life. It's incredible. This album is specifically representative of my kind of obsession with the idea of loop in music this year. Repetitive cycle thing moving over and over and over, spinning around itself. I'm finding that a lot in dance music. I really, really, really love it. So, 4 new hit songs. It has that feeling for me. Next, books. First, we're going to talk about William Gibson's Pattern Recognition, which I think if I had to choose one work from this collection that I've made, this is the work of 2023. That's not to say it's the best work, but it is the most 2023 for me. It concerns travel and dislocation and deep immersion and art practice and a kind of recognition of emergent internal abilities and understanding the differences between yourself and the rest of the world, and how that affects your experience and how that can be transmuted into new forms. This book kept coming back up in my head. I read it early on. I read it twice. I read it early on in the year and halfway through the year. And over, different experiences have been like, oh, like pattern recognition. Oh, like pattern recognition. Deeply wonderful piece of work. Gibson is an amazing writer. His characterization and world are fantastic. And for something to be in my thoughts as much as pattern recognition has suggested, it's very, very good. Next up in books is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. People know this one. People love this one. It's a famous, famous book. And the reason it's famous is, fuck, what a good book. It's an incredible feat of scope and living, breathing humanity in a textual form. It's so alive. That sense of trying to make art that is alive has become a core part of the compass that drives me to make things, that drives my art right now. Just trying to check with every choice I make, is this more alive or is this less alive? And keep pushing towards the direction of making something that feels living within itself. 100 Years of Solitude is just full of it, and it just pours out of it. Also, the consensus seems to be, maybe, I'm not super across this, that this book is hard to read. This book isn't hard to read. This book is fluid and nice to read. You might have to let it wash over you at some points if you find the family structure hard, but it's not deliberately obfuscative. Sure, characters have the same names sometimes, but those characters are always distinct enough in personality or age or build or other extraneous factors that they become easily identifiable. Seriously, if you have any passing interest in 100 Years of Solitude, you should read it. It's really genuinely amazing. It's literature, I mean. And finally, Game of the Year, baby. It's Drool of the Killer by Garment District. Wow, this one is the best game I played last year. It's about 15 minutes long. It's just got unimaginably thick atmosphere. The attraction I have to its world and its feeling is just totally electric. I lock into it and it changes the way I feel about the world around me and outside of the computer for like a good up to 2 hours afterwards, which is how you know this thing is seriously strong, when it's taking a finger and just pushing down into reality until something is warped and takes ages to settle again back up. It's beautiful. It represents what feels like a narrative and level designer at decades of experience. Of course it is. These were revealed to be made by Stephen Gilmurphy, I believe that's his name, and he's been making stuff for a very long time. And Drool is like maybe the first of the Killer series. There are multiple of these, and maybe the very first extremely approachable versions of his work. Before there's been a little bit more obfuscation, not a lot. They still read as very earnest, but the Of the Killer series polishes it, and man, Gil Murphy has a perfect understanding of how level design and narrative fit into each other and drive each other, and how changes in geometry can communicate the change in mood and drive it and make you feel like you're sort of screwing deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the world. It's amazing. It's such a feat, and the fact that it presents it so nonchalantly is wonderful. I love Drool of the Killer. Finally, this thing is basically a perfect horror world piece. Horror world is a term I used to think about certain substrates of horror, or not even horror, but just like fiction, as opposed to horror where there's some broken intrusion into the world. Horror world is that there is something fundamentally wrong with the reality in a world or a fiction. And everything else just seems to sort of melt around it. The Of the Killer series does this with so much grace and humor. It's totally beautiful. It's the world of those games is filled with constant murder and bloodshed and conspiracy, and just death gangs and obviously like evil police, which, I mean, this is not so dissimilar from the real world. I don't like the pigs. But it does this so beautifully, and it concocts this world, and it holds up the balance of having this horror world, but never dropping so far into despair or real terror that can come with it that I can find really overwhelms me. It's just like a perfect tonal tightrope walk. It's a miracle. Play Drool of the Killer, and then play all the other Of the Killer games. Heart of the Killer, the most recent, is borderline literature. I just realized Drool made Thumper, which is one of my favorite games, and this game is called Drool of the Killer. I guess if you want to coerce me into loving something, just like incorporate the word drool into the title or developer name somewhere or somewhere else. I will leave you with that, a new surefire way to manipulate me into loving your art. Thank you, everybody. This has been Finn from the Satellite for a special micro thing. New work soon. I'm working on something big. It will be around shortly. Okay, goodbye.